Tonight, the federal government drops their 2024 budget, what it means for Indigenous peoples. A historic signing between the province of BC and the Haida Nation.
Many identified substance use as a means to cope with their life circumstances.
And the Manitoba Advocate for Children and Youth is calling for more resources to tackle addiction issues for Indigenous youth. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. The Trudeau government unveiled its 2024 budget in Ottawa on Tuesday, and there are a lot of items that will fund Indigenous priorities. But less spending is being committed to Indigenous concerns than in previous years. APTN's Fraser Needham has the details.
This is what Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland had to say about the 2024 budget in the House of Commons on Tuesday.
Mr. Speaker, we are acting today to ensure fairness for every generation. We are moving with purpose to help build more homes faster. We are making life cost less. We're driving the kind of economic growth that will ensure every generation of Canadians can reach their full potential.
But unlike previous speeches by finance ministers, the word Indigenous was not included. And it is a budget that invests less in Indigenous priorities than in previous years. From 2015 to the current fiscal year, the Liberals spent about $32 billion on Indigenous initiatives. That is now projected to drop to about $9 billion in new spending over the next 5 years. This year's budget targets $918 million over 5 years for Indigenous housing and infrastructure. This is also much lower than the roughly $6 billion over the same time period put forward in the previous two budgets. And only a drop in the bucket of the $349 billion the Assembly of First Nations says is needed to address the First Nations infrastructure gap by 2030. There's not much for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls initiatives either. Just $1.3 million over 3 years to co-develop a red dress alert system. Other Indigenous spending in the budget includes $1.5 billion over 5 years for the Indigenous communities exercising jurisdiction over child welfare services, $1.1 billion for First Nations and Inuit health, $927 million for on-reserve income assistance. The government is also making about $5 billion in loan guarantees available for Indigenous communities that want to pursue natural resource projects. There's also $388 million over 5 years in new supports for Indigenous entrepreneurship and tourism. Other new spending includes $290 million over 5 years to support Indigenous cultures and language, $243 million for First Nations post-secondary education, and $168 million to address anti-Indigenous racism in healthcare. The deficit is expected to drop slightly to $38.4 billion this fiscal year from $40 billion last year. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Critics were quick to poke holes in the budget's response to Indigenous concerns. Chrystia Freeland's budget may have set aside billions of dollars to tackle Indigenous issues, but that didn't stop politicians from pointing out some shortcomings.
What is the plan to ensure that Indigenous communities that for so long have not received adequate funding for infrastructure and housing, what's the plan to close that gap?
Okay, the red dress alert. We've debated it. We want to see it. $1.3 million over 3 years? Contrast that with the immediate $47 million for the crisis in auto thefts.
You can find much more over on our website on the budget. That's aptnnews.ca. The United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues continued today. Discussions included the implementation of Indigenous rights and the problem of Canadian-owned mining companies operating in the Amazon. Angel Moore brings us a wrap-up of today's events.
I'm here at the United Nations headquarters in New York City, where representatives voice their concerns over Canadian mining companies operating in South America, saying they are destroying their lands. Zenaida Yasakama's community is in the Amazon of Peru. Gisela Hurtado translated.
We would like that the Canadian government listen to us can stop destroying our indigenous territories, that they can take all the measures and stop talking with the Ecuadorian government, because our territories are not on sale. Our territories are live. Is there where we harvest? Is there where we have everything for our food? We ask respect for our rights and also for the rights of nature.
Hunter Colbert is a youth representative with the Ontario Native Women's Association, or ONWA. She says everyone wants to protect the earth.
Doesn't matter where you're from, we all have one similarity in what we're here to speak about, and that's the protection of our people, our language, our culture, and Mother Earth as well, because we're all connected in that way. If Mother Earth is not safe, neither are we as women and as people around the world.
Cora McGuire-Syret is the executive director of ONWA. She says the forum is an opportunity for women to reclaim their voices.
We're here mentoring and supporting youth and them speaking on their own behalf with their own voices and speaking to their own solutions, because the interventions we make this week is going to impact them and their future, because this is like their world and their leadership.
One of the side events at the forum this week will be looking at Indigenous identity fraud. I'll have a report of that later this week. Angel Moore, APTN National News, New York City.
Thanks, Angel. To the West Coast now. In the province of British Columbia and the Haida Nation signed an Aboriginal title document that has been years in the making over the weekend. According to both parties, the ceremony on Haida Gwaii cemented the Haida Agreement into history. APTN's Lee Wilson reports.
Representatives from the province of British Columbia and the Council of Haida Nation gathered for a historic signing ceremony. Negotiations for the Haida Title Lands Agreement started more than 20 years ago. Gagwis Jason Alsop thanked everyone for coming to witness the historic day on Haida Gwaii.
It's a continuation of many years of work in our recent times since the coming of the Crown, but it's the carrying forward of our inherent Haida title that we've been passed down to us from our ancestors and the responsibility that comes with it.
The agreement will shift Crown land on the islands of Haida Gwaii back to the Haida. According to the provincial government, the transfer will be carried out in stages, but private property will not be affected, and the province will still be responsible for infrastructure and services. BC Premier David Eby says this agreement was long overdue.
What we've done here together is something that the courts have been telling governments in Canada to do for many generations now. That the provincial and federal government need to sit down with First Nations governments and recognize title.
The Haida Nation gifted Premier Eby with a blanket made by Musqueam weaver Deborah Sparrow. BC Indigenous Relations Minister Murray Rankin stressed the importance of resolving matters through negotiations.
We could have been facing each other in a courtroom. We could have been fighting for years and years, but we chose a different path. We chose a path that requires creativity and courage. And we got there together because we are trying to create a better future for our children.
The Haida and the province sat down and officially signed their agreement. Gagwis said the signing puts to rest any debate or conflict around the lands, and they can now move forward together.
So it's an important time, and it lays the foundation for a future together where we can acknowledge the truth, acknowledge the history, but also look forward to build a brighter future for the Haida Nation and the people of Haida Gwaii, and provide hope and inspiration.
BC will introduce legislation later this month to formally recognize Haida title in provincial law. Lee Wilson, APTN National News, Kitimat.
Meanwhile, the Supreme Court of Canada has ruled in favor of the Blood Tribe in a land dispute that dates back more than a century. The court found the First Nation in southern Alberta is entitled to more than 400 square kilometers of additional territory In 1877, Ottawa agreed to give 1 square mile of land for each family of 5. In its ruling, the court notes the Crown has acknowledged it has failed to live up to the land agreement. Blood Tribe Council says it is now considering all of its options. It's been a rough couple of weeks for the Native Women's Association of Canada. On Friday, it parted ways with its CEO. After the break, we'll speak with the president and the interim CEO. Stick around. Welcome back. Indigenous youth account for 80% of advocacy cases each year in Manitoba. So the official advocate for children and youth hopes to get a specific health and mental health strategy from the provincial government. Macy, for short, surveyed over 36 youth and 260 clinical and non-clinical professionals in the health, addictions, child welfare, education, and justice fields. 61% of the respondents said that Manitoba cannot meet the needs of young people with addictions issues. Sherry Gott is advocate for children and youth.
Many identified substance use as a means to cope with their life circumstances, whether that be mental health, family issues, lack of recreational opportunities, painful life experiences, and more. Most identified wanting help, but didn't know where to go.
The Native Women's Association of Canada is regrouping after parting ways with its CEO, Lynn Gruhl, last week. A budget slash, massive layoffs, and allegations of a union-busting campaign has left the national organization in turmoil. Carol McBride is the president of NWAC, and Madeline Redfern is the former mayor of Iqaluit, who has just been announced as the new interim CEO. Carolyn, Madeline, thanks for being with us. I guess, Carol, to you first. Why did NWAC part ways with Lynn Gruhl?
Well, she decided that she wanted to go on her own, and we just wanted to thank Lynn for her time with us, and we parted ways.
Just briefly, I guess, the way the press release was written led some to believe that maybe she was going to a different part of NWAC, but she's left the organization?
Yes, she's left the organization completely.
Okay. How much of the turmoil that NWAC is currently experiencing and has been for a few years do you think could be laid at the feet of the former CEO?
I haven't been involved with NWAC. I just was in as president a year ago last July. So not really knowing about the past on the relationship that the PTMAs had with her. I can't comment on that.
I guess, just in the last few weeks alone, we've been hearing from, safe to say, more than a dozen women who have been speaking out about their concerns. How do you begin to repair the strained relationships with Indigenous women?
Well, right now, we are going to be concentrating on restructuring a bit on about, with NWAC. We wanted a place where staff, that feel that they're valued. We want, to have a wellness program put in for them as well. We're really going to concentrate on the wellness of our staff.
You had announced an interim CEO, but you have Madeline Redfern here with you now as well, who's going to be acting as interim CEO. Madeline, what do you see as your role and the challenges ahead?
So I've been brought in to assist the organization through this transition period. Part of it, of course, is going to be seeking a new permanent CEO. We're at year end. We're also working on the upcoming year budget. We need to ensure that we continue to deliver on our core programs and our projects and have the staff and the resources to be able to do so. So that is my priority, is to ensure that the organization is stable, day-to-day operations, of course, continue, and that we meet our contractual obligations with our funders and do all the work the good work that NWAC does on behalf of our membership.
Like you mentioned there, Madeline, a lot of work to do, a lot of challenges, I guess, to face. What do you see as concerns for programs or, the other things that you do for Indigenous women out there?
So the good news is that even having met with the staff, or at least some of them this morning, is identifying which funding that we have, ensuring that we actually proceed with those projects, have the resources available for them. My apologies, the phone is ringing. We'll just get that out of the way. And so we're seeing, who do we have in the organization? Who do we need to bring in? And of course, there'll be regular reporting to the Executive Council and the full board about the state of the organization, and that we continue, as I said, to ensure that we deliver on the programs and the services that the organization has done for many years.
Carol, Madeline, any message, I guess, to some of the former employees or other women who have felt harmed by this organization in recent years?
I think that's one of the reasons we want to put in measures to make sure that no staff, would have to suffer any kind of mistreatment or anything like that. We want to be assured of that, not saying that, and we're going to work towards that on the safety and the wellness of our women that work for us.
Carol, Madeline, we'll have to leave it there, but do appreciate you both taking some time to talk about this important subject with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A powwow that started as a hope and a dream is now in its second year. That story and more coming up after the break. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Last night, as the sun set on the Haida Nation before the moon became the only light to be seen, Clarence Jones captured this idyllic moment. Thanks for sharing, Clarence. We want you to share with us and all of our viewers the beauty you see on the land, in nature, community, or your family by sending your pictures to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, 15 with showers in Halifax, 11 in Fredericton. -3 and snow in Kuujjuaq, 0 with flurries in Nain. 12 in Montreal, 11 for Val-d'Or. 7 in Sault Ste. Marie, showers in 10 in North Bay. 4 in Thunder Bay, 6 above in Sioux Lookout. 8 for God's Lake, 9 in Norway House. 10 in Barons River, 14 in Winnipeg. Showers in 15 for Regina, rain in 9 in Saskatoon. 8 in Meadow Lake, sunny and 0 for La Ronge. Sunny across much of northern Alberta, 7 in High Level, 1 in Fort Chipewyan. 5 for Edmonton, 7 for Lethbridge. Sunny and 12 for Vancouver, 15 in Kamloops. 8 in Prince George, 11 in Smithers. Sunny and 5 in Old Crow, 8 in Whitehorse. Sunny and -3 for Yellowknife, 6 in Norman Wells. -2 in Sax Harbor, 3 above in Paulatuck. -5 in Chesterfield, 3 below in Whale Cove. -14 in Resolute, -12 with snow in Igloolik. A trade school in Manitoba hosted the province's first graduation powwow of the year on Friday. APTN's Sierra Bettens was there and has this report.
A sea of colors lit up the Manitoba Institute of Trades and Technology as dancers took center stage. It's the second year the school has hosted a graduation powwow. Rhonda Klippenstein, Manager of Indigenous Initiatives and Community Development, was tasked with organizing it.
The powwow had always been, I think, a hope and a dream and a wish for MITT, and then last year, now that they had someone kind of dedicated to do that, we decided to go ahead and to honor our graduates of MITT.
Brandon Bloomhagen is among the students graduating this year. Bloomhagen, who's attending his first grad powwow, will earn his industrial mechanic millwright certificate.
Start my apprenticeship in millwrighting, and then I will be going back to school and hopefully 4 to 5 years get my full red seal and continue with a good career path.
Neil Cook began his term as president and CEO in July 2023, becoming the first First Nations person to hold the position. During the ceremony, he was honored with a beaded medallion and an eagle feather. Last year, he says the event saw over 700 attendees.
Many of the people that are here are not necessarily all coming from our First Nations community. They're coming from communities from across the world, and it's a real opportunity for people to learn more about what we in Manitoba have as an Indigenous culture and what we as a community can be when we diversify.
Reflecting on his time at MITT, Bloomhagen shared a few words of wisdom for Indigenous students interested in the trades.
Looking to see what skills and interests you have and apply. There are a lot of help and just effort. Like from high school, I just graduated, and then in something I feel passionate about, my grades have soared.
Sierra Bettens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Good stuff. Looking forward to all the graduation stories coming up. The Canadian Association of Journalists, or the CAJ, has announced the nominees for their 2023 awards. And APTN National News and APTN Investigates received a nomination each. Brittany Guillot is nominated for her work on the Inside Corrections series, 2,180 Days, where she was given special access to inmate Joey Toussaint, who spent more than 2,180 days in solitary confinement. And Sav Jones is nominated for the JHR CAJ Emerging Indigenous Journalist Award for all their work on reporting on Indigenous issues. Congrats to you both. The Indigenous Green Office recently celebrated the news of long-term stable funding. The ISO was launched in 2017 to champion Indigenous green-based storytellers through funding and advocacy work. CEO Carrie Swanson is our guest on tonight's all-new episode of Face to Face and explains the importance of the ISO.
Got my start 20 years ago at the Imaginative Film Festival, and we've been advocating for much longer than that time for Indigenous specific funding for the sector, and it just wasn't happening quickly enough. And what we saw was that producers who were non-Indigenous were accessing large amounts of funding to tell Indigenous stories, while Indigenous filmmakers and producers were not able to access that kind of funding to tell their stories.
You can catch our interview with Carrie on Face to Face in less than 2 minutes' time. Less than a minute's time. It's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Tuesday. For news anytime and more on today's budget, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Marcy McGuitch, thanks for being with us. Have a great night.